And here's your host, Jim Flyzik.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the show. I'm Jim Flyzik. During today's show, we will discuss progress being made in secure cloud computing in the federal government. With me today on the show are John Hale, the Chief of the Cloud Portfolio at DISA, David Shive, the Chief Information Officer at GSA, Colonel John Rozsnyai, the Chief Enterprise Architecture Division at HQ at the U.S. Army, Dan Kent, Director of Solutions and Chief Technology Officer, Cisco Systems Public Sector, Chris Wiedemann, the Cloud Market Intelligence Consultant at the immixGroup, and Don Hewitt, the Director, Workload and Cloud Practice, U.S. Public Sector, Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Let's get into the subject. We're talking cloud and progress in cloud. Let's start with John Hale over at DISA. John, tell us about some progress you're seeing with cloud computing programs over at DISA.
Sure. So first off, good afternoon. Thanks for having us on. I want to say, so from a DISA perspective, what we've done at DISA is we've taken a lot of the different cloud programs and we've consolidated them into a single program office. And I was given the extreme pleasure of serving as the leader of that organization.
Very nice.
But the big things we're doing right now, so we have two key initiatives going on in the world of cloud. Number one is what we call our MilCloud 2.0 effort. Which you're going to hear a little bit about later, which is more about bringing commercial cloud providers on premise and delivering cloud capabilities to the department from our concrete. And then the other one is what we call our cloud access point or our secure cloud computing architecture, which is basically putting everything in place to facilitate the Department of Defense's secure use of commercial off-prem cloud capabilities, both infrastructure as a service and software as a service.
Yeah, it's an interesting trend because, we've been doing the show now on cloud for several years, and that trend has been obvious. At first, it was like, we're not really sure about the commercial side. We'll do things, we'll have our internal clouds, then hybrid clouds, and now I'm hearing everyone talk a lot more about commercial use of cloud too. Colonel Rozsnyai, how about over at the Army? What are some of the areas of progress you're seeing with cloud?
Yeah, Jim, thanks again for letting me back on the show again. I'll tell you, we've made a lot of progress here in the last year. Since we released our cloud strategy back last March, then we released a cloud policy throughout the Army that gave us the left and right limits of what we would keep on-prem versus what we would allow to go off-prem. And we're actually starting to do a lot of pilots. We have been over the course of the last year or so. And we're learning quite a bit from them. I will tell you, one of the big things we're learning from them is that we're starting to see this dynamic cultural shift that we've all been waiting on. Yeah. And so we've been working very hard with the pilots to help DISA with the cloud access points and to give good metrics and feedback to them on the throughput and additional capacity we might need in the future. And then helping to shape the secure cloud computing architecture, this new thing. I would tell you there's a lot of interest across industry partners, and we meet with them on a very regular basis because we want those innovative ideas and new ways of doing business. We're getting ready. We're right on the cusp now of releasing a request for proposal to do an on-prem, commercially owned, commercially contracted cloud capability down at Redstone Arsenal. And so that'll be the first instantiation. It's broken into like 3 phases. So the first phase is kind of Army only. We're going to learn some things, give some feedback, lots of eyes within the DoD looking at that, and really trying to see some of the same objectives that MilCloud 2.0 is
We'll have to get you back next year to give us an update on how that one's going too. That's the other trend. When we first started cloud programs, it was like we're not really sure, and the press was like question marks. Now the trade press, it's everyone's really moving out. I think it's the trend is obvious. Don Hewitt, how about over at HP Enterprise? How do you guys support your customer base here, and what are you seeing in terms of progress with cloud?
We're seeing a lot of Hewlett Packard Enterprise. We're seeing a lot of great progress around how our customers are starting to really realize that the environment that they're working in is truly transforming into a hybrid-based environment. So in essence, when we start to look at the workload placement, we start to look at the economies, contract type evolution that we have with some of our customers and the procurements we're seeing. It's a lot of movement towards how do we assist that customer to truly take advantage of a hybrid model that not only brings really kind of that choice, right? That choice to what platform best suits my workload, but how do we also start looking at what is the best platform to place that workload on. So as we start to evaluate the market and the technologies and other things of the sort, we're seeing a lot of our customers really in the public sector really start to look towards, this is not all about choosing one platform. Right. It's not all about really trying to assess a one-size-fits-all. Now I look at options. Now I look at what is that best fit that satisfies, in all honesty, my budget,
Right.
but also satisfies those performance and security criteria that I need from an actual service provider.
Yeah. David Shive over GSA. I guess when I think of GSA, I think of cloud in a couple of ways. You got cloud for the GSA, but you also have the FedRAMP and government-wide responsibilities, things like that. But tell us a little bit about some of the progress you're seeing in the world of cloud at GSA.
Great. So, Jim, thanks for having us. We're excited to tell the story. We pushed very heavily into the cloud 5 or 6 years ago now, so our use of the cloud is pretty mature by now. We started with some very traditional things, moving email and collaboration tools, CRM, stuff like that out to the cloud. All that back office type functionality that is the engine that makes a government agency work. Now we're pushing more deeply into the cloud. We have about 60% of our infrastructure is in the cloud now. Really good numbers. The benefits are pretty much what everybody expected. We're driving down costs. We're increasing mobility and usability. We've blown through the traditional borders of what's a federal facility so that people can compute from any place at any time in any location. We're seeing significant cost savings. We've been able to, as a part of our transformation of IT that we provide into the agency, we've been able to shave about 20% of our budget.
Wow, terrific.
And cloud is a significant part of that.
That's a real story.
And those activities that we've generated within GSA IT supporting the business of GSA then downstream informs a few of our products that we provide to the rest of the federal government. So the Federal Acquisition Service, which is the purchasing agent of the federal government, they look to us to say the acquisition products and tools that we deliver for the rest of the federal government, has this been vetted? Did GSA IT try it? Did it work well? Did they get the returns that they expected? So we inform those acquisition products. The new Technology Transformation Service that was just stood up in GSA last week, we partner with them and with the groups that are forming that, 18F and others. Because we're a real live federal agency that's been acting and operating in the cloud for 5 or 6 years now, they say, how can we take the best practices that GSA IT has formed and push that out to the rest of the federal government?
That's why we're excited to have you on the show. We've had GSA on just about every year. We've been following, and GSA is kind of seen as being out front in a lot of this. So thanks for sharing the stories. Dan Kent, how about Cisco? I imagine Cisco plays a fairly significant role in this too. And how are you supporting and how are you seeing progress supporting your customer base as they move to cloud?
That's right, Jim. So with Cisco, we have such a large portfolio that we are helping our customers on many facets of cloud. On the infrastructure as a service, we talked about hybrid cloud and how that's really pervasive within the federal government. Cisco is really helping our customers build out their private cloud, make sure that as they go to the public cloud with their workloads, they can do it securely, maintaining their security policy both on their premise as well as in the public cloud. We're focused clearly on the hybrid because we think that especially the federal market, that's the very short term. We're going to be doing hybrid clouds for most of our workloads. We're also focused on software as a service. We have a lot of applications around collaboration that we deliver to government customers as well as security applications. And we just recently announced that our WebEx conferencing system is FedRAMP compliant, and we're going forward with all of our applications to go to that FedRAMP compliancy. So you'll be able to, our customers in the federal government will be able to get whether it's voice, video, all those services in a FedRAMP environment on the cloud if they choose to, or if they want to keep it in their on-premise, they can do that as well. So really it's about options.
Fantastic. Chris Wiedemann, Cloud Market Intelligence Consultant. You're going to make us all smarter here. What do you see in terms of progress across the government with the user base you're working with?
Sure. So, immixGroup as a distributor, we have a slightly different view on the market to everybody else on the panel, but I'd like to mirror a lot of what they've already said. We've seen over the last 12 months, I think, a real concrete shift in the way that government is talking about cloud. There's the growing realization that, not every workload is a fit for one given platform or one given infrastructure. And so based on our position in the market, I think what we'd like to do is offer choice. We want to bring as many CSPs and as many of our line card vendors to our customers, to our government partners as we possibly can, and we want to do that through the cloud.
Yeah, very good, very good. I know Cisco and HP would like everybody to buy Cisco and HP, but I do tend to agree with you that the competitive environment is something you got to strive for. I especially see that in telecom programs. Agencies that have a mix of all of the telecom providers are seeing much better pricing than someone who's locked into just one. but similar to the point you're making there. David Shive, give me a program, a specific program at GSA that you think you're proud of that really is one that you would showcase, saying it's really doing some really neat things.
Right. So rather than go with something sexy and new, I'm actually going to go with something that's a bit traditional. Our email and collaboration. When we had 17 different mail programs and systems running in GSA, and we consolidated onto one cloud-based mail program. We did that 4 years ago now, and the business of running mail and running collaboration was transformative. So email's email. You know, you get your message, and
17 to 1 in the culture of government, that's still something to be proud of.
Absolutely. So the being able to get to your email from any location on any device at any time, that's really helpful. The collaboration piece is the part that's really transformed the way we do business. Document sharing is simplified. Getting to be in a highly mobile environment, getting to see people face to face through some Hangouts type technology, stuff like that's really valuable. Being able to collaborate on a single document with 17 or 18 different people all working on the document at the same time minimizes those work actions where you're moving stuff around. And knowing that you can have access to those computing resources and those information assets any place has been transformative for the way we do government.
Yeah, I bet it is. It sounds exciting. Colonel Rozsnyai, give me a specific program over at the Army that you think is one that you would hold up and say, here's a program that's going to the cloud that's doing really cool things.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. First of all, I wanted to pull a string on just real quickly on this hybrid cloud approach, because that's clearly our strategy, and that's why we're doing both on and off-prem. But this is going to be a multi-vendor environment, right? So we're looking at cloud orchestration capabilities, some type of an enterprise system where we can touch multiple vendors in an agnostic way to do that. But I wouldn't want to point to a specific program necessarily. What I'd like to say is the convergence of all the lessons learned that we have received out of the pilots, both from an infrastructure as a service as well as software as a service, have really changed a lot of people's minds. And so, you know, for the last several years, the big discussion has been about the culture and people, the server huggers. We still have some of those, but what you're starting to see right now across the entire Army, both at the senior leadership and at the lower levels, is that cloud is a great thing. I'll give you a couple of examples.
Okay.
Within our Trading and Doctrine Command, the instructors, they are looking at doing away with their current infrastructure, the ideas of procure and set up and test and all that into a laboratory environment, so that as students want to go in and deploy VMs or into the cloud, they can do that on the cloud. And they don't have to go and procure all their own stuff. And so they can do the evaluation of their student, all the testing, et cetera, and then they can spin it back down and save a considerable amount of cost doing that. So those training labs are research and development. Even our development community now is saying, look, it takes a long time to procure something. It takes a long time to get it set up and all that. We really want to be able to deliver more rapid, innovative capabilities. And so let's use the cloud now as the infrastructure, which I can get relatively quickly.
Wait for the next generation of employees enters the workforce. They're going to want an app for everything. They're going to think it's like, like my iPhone, just grab an app somewhere.
Well, because of the elastic computing, people are starting to understand that even from a modeling and simulation and doing advanced computing capabilities, we're looking at doing that across the Army. And I got people just beating down my door saying, when can I go? When can I go? And I looked at my buddy John over here to my left, and I say, when can I go, John? When can I go?
That's why we put you together, by the way.
Yeah. So, but we're working hard to do that. But again, I think the convergence of all those lessons learned is really starting to change the cultural view within the Army that we don't have to own everything.
Excellent. In 136 shows now, and cultural change has been mentioned at all 136. John Hale, tell us what specific program would you look to that you think's one that's going to make a big difference at DISA?
So there are lots of programs that are going towards the cloud, that a lot of opportunity there to succeed. I think the one that I would highlight the most is probably our cloud access point, our secure cloud computing architecture wrapped around that. The number one program that's going through that right now is a program called Collaboration Pathfinder. And that's a joint venture between the Defense Logistics Agency, the U.S. Air Force, and DISA. And then recently, the Army Corps of Engineers has shown a lot of interest in it. But that's basically leveraging off-premise commercial software as a service for delivery of email, calendaring, and unified capabilities. And so that's leveraging the commercial cloud access point that we're delivering as an enterprise capability. But that's probably the biggest game changer. And when we talk about cost savings within the department, going forward, we see hosting and compute in a hybrid model, right? So we see the need for traditional big iron on the floor. There are certain programs, projects, workloads specifically that can't be virtualized, can't move into a cloud architecture, or more importantly, they don't have enough money to make that transition, right? So we see big iron still as something that's necessary that has to go forward. Then we have the on-prem cloud capabilities that we're talking about from a DISA perspective. We're looking at MilCloud 2.0. We're heavily involved with what the kernel's doing at Redstone. Our programs are kind of going lockstep together, and hopefully from a department perspective, we're going to get some really good results out of both of those. Right. And so, and then the third part is the infrastructure and the software as a service off-prem, and that's where we see the biggest bang for the buck going forward from a department perspective. That's where we're going to see the biggest savings going forward, is transitioning as much workload as possible to the commercial off-prem capability. Now, with that said, once again, it's a culture issue, right? It's that whole data ownership problem. And so that's something that we have to battle every day to make sure that our mission partners feel comfortable with the solutions that we're putting forward on the ground. So.
Excellent. Great stuff. Dan, give me, from a Cisco perspective, a program that you guys are involved with that you think is going to make a big difference.
Sure. I think one of the key areas that will help the government as we start delivering security applications from the cloud. Mm-hmm. Clearly, there's a lot of intelligence that we get as a commercial company around the globe in terms of the threats that are out there. In that very dynamic environment, you need to have that visibility around the globe so you can provide that information to your customers right here in Washington, D.C. or wherever they are. Right. So I really think that if we are certainly, we're going to be providing collaboration applications in the cloud and all that, but I really think we're a nice fit for cloud. Surprisingly, by the way, is this cybersecurity and how we can ensure that we get in front of the very dynamic landscape.
It is a huge topic right now, cybersecurity, and my personal information has been compromised now 7 times, and once turned into a full identity theft. So I'm like on a passion on this issue, but there was that early argument that, the cloud will have security, it's going to be a big issue, and you're going to trust others to. But, my mind always was where we've come with security over the years. We have so many Band-Aids in place, and we've been patching things, fixing things, throwing equipment at it. It's an opportunity to step back and look at the big picture and really take a holistic approach to security. And I agree with the point you make. I think it was an opportunity to drastically improve security compared to where we are today, where oftentimes we don't even know what we have in our networks today. What do you think, Chris Wiedemann? What's a program you would point to that you think is a pretty cool thing that's going to make a big difference? Sure.
I think there are a couple that we're looking at. We were able a year or two ago at this point to work with the agriculture department to deliver them actually a CPIC solution that we assembled through our line card with the CSPs we work with and some of the software providers. We were able to bundle that, provide it as a SaaS offering, and that's something that we're tracking and monitoring fairly actively. We've also been working with a couple of our suppliers with the Census Bureau as they ramp up for 2020, so obviously concluding their pilots fairly recently, looking at the ways they're going to support the anticipated surge in demand there, and that's something that we're staying on top of that we think could be fairly transformational.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Don, I don't want to miss you, but you're going to lead off. But we first need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with John Hale from DISA, David Shive from GSA, Colonel Rozsnyai from U.S. Army, Dan Kent from Cisco Systems Public Sector, Chris Wiedemann from immixGroup, and Don Hewitt from Hewlett Packard Enterprise. We're talking secure cloud computing. When we went to break, we had heard from our panelists, but we did not have a chance to hear from Don Hewitt yet. Don, what would you look in terms of if you wanted to pick a program that you think cloud's really making a difference and is going to have some benefits? Is there something you would point at?
You know, I'd like to kind of look at one of the recent awards that we received at Hewlett Packard Enterprise that really took and looked at a customer, what their challenges are, right? Some of the things that we look at when we look towards hybrid transformation, it's not a flip of a switch, right? There's a journey that has to be undertaken there. One of the things that was quickly realized that in a enterprise that is all traditional based today, maybe some virtualization mixed in there. There's a lot of inefficiencies. There are a lot of things that really we can start to take advantage of to move that customer in the right direction. One of the things that was obviously achieved early on was to start driving automation into this virtualized platform, start to realize how can I take a private cloud type of model, drop it on board that's standard across the architecture that develops a repeatable type of model, but then also places automation on top of that to create efficiencies in labor. So we've achieved up to 20% reduction in labor and up to 80% efficiency within the time of delivery from particular assets being deployed on a VM or across any changes that occur to that environment. And then when we take that automation and then we look at how that transforms and rides into the hybrid type of model, that customer who is today, again, really trying to figure out where to go, the option of that orchestration on top of that existing platform can now be utilized to extend out to other platforms as well. Third-party public cloud providers, alternate type of architectures based on different type of technologies. This starts to really drive things that today when we start hearing about hybrid and we hear about a lot of the demand, the reality is a lot of the customers, a lot of the workloads out there, 80% of them just about are still traditional-based workloads. They are not ready to take advantage of all the aspects that cloud delivers. So I think as we look towards that success, it's really undertaking what you have and developing that journey towards that objective.
Excellent points there. Colonel Rozsnyai, what are some of the hard things, the challenges, the things that you need to overcome to get where you want to be in this programs?
People, right?
Yeah.
We always talk about that, but like I said before, we're really starting to see this cultural change. But I'll tell you, there's still some small pockets in the organization that are not yet ready to press the I believe button and think that somebody else can do that a little bit faster, better, cheaper than they can.
On several shows, and I got to look it up to see if I'm actually quoting the right person, but I think it's Robert Kennedy that said that 1/3 of everybody's against everything all the time, no matter what it is.
Well, we're probably at that 1/3 mark. But again, we're really starting to see that different shift. But we have to demonstrate success, and we're showing that with the pilots that we're specifically monitoring, tracking. But at the same time, we've got a lot of early adopters that have gone out before us, okay, before there was a cloud security requirements guide, before there was a cloud access point, et cetera. And so now one of the challenges is to bring those back in, and we're doing that through a thing we call common services deployment. Identity access management, host-based security, those types of things that we in the Department of Defense require to get an authority to operate anywhere. Right now, those early adopters are providing those capabilities themselves, which is an increased cost. And so we're looking at deploying a common services infrastructure enclave within the off-prem commercial cloud, and then repoint these early adopters and all the pilots as well back to that. It's going to save us a considerable amount of money, and it's going to give us more visibility in not just the cyber defense aspects, because all the sensors will be feeding from the application will be feeding back to us in a centralized manner, but it's also going to give us visibility of the dollars that we're totally spending across the Army.
Yeah, that's another good point. Gives you a better handle to get a handle on your portfolio and the dollars you're spending.
Well, it does, and what we don't want to do is get into a situation where we're almost having to do data center consolidation in the cloud, right? We've been doing data center consolidation on-prem for quite some time, so we don't want to exasperate that.
Right.
And so, we're taking a very cautious and methodical approach to how we go forward doing that. And the last thing I'd say is that the challenge is right now there's only a few games in town, service providers that have a DoD provisional authorization to operate at the higher impact levels. And so we need more industry partners to start achieving that provisional authorization to give us more competition and give us more things, because as was stated earlier, by Chris and Dan, not every workload is suitable for a particular service provider's infrastructure. We have to look at and what's the best balance and the cost and benefit and performance based on that. Well, I guess that's about it, really. I will tell you, we don't have the one last thing is the training of our people to leverage cloud technologies is not where it ought to be internally today. And so we're really striving to look for a consulting, engineering, and migration support value-added service as we move into that environment. So we do it collectively
Yeah.
in a good way.
Excellent point. Just about every show we do, we talk about the usually there's a couple good people, but the depth's not there. You don't have the bench strength, and you've got just a couple people, so you need to rely on industry.
We've been designing applications and doing a very good job at it for a very long time, but now is a different thought, different mentality, different technology, and so we need some assistance outside to do that, and so we're looking for value-added services to help us.
You made good points, too, about data center consolidation and cloud. I think I was talking to David before we started to do the show about the fact that we do shows on data center consolidation, we do shows on cloud computing, and they're starting to intertwine. It's not as easy to pull them apart anymore. John Hale, what do you think? What are the tough things, challenges, things that are in the way for you to get where you want to go?
So I say I don't think it's much of a surprise to most folks. Is definitely not a surprise to the folks on the panel. It's really about security and the assurance of our data from a departmental perspective. There's certain types of data that the department just doesn't feel comfortable transitioning to a commercial cloud environment today, even though they may have received the right provisional authorization to host that level of data. Specifically things like nuclear command and control, right? There's just certain types of workloads that we just aren't comfortable with yet. As we work more and more with our commercial providers and build that trust factor up, then we'll get there. I look back at where we're at today with far as what we're trusting from a commercial cloud provider perspective, as far as where we were just 2 years ago, and we've come a long way, but there's still road to go.
Sure.
The good news is that the department's leadership is committed. As the colonel's highlighted, we've from top down within the department. The department is committed to moving our capabilities.
That's a big deal. If you get the leadership behind you, that makes things just a lot easier to move forward. And we talked earlier, the trend is there. I think David said first, you start with the administrative back office stuff, and then you start, what can we do next? And you work your way up to the more sensitive kinds of applications. David, what do you think? What's some of the things that are in the way, challenges that you need to overcome to get where you want to go?
Right. So to mirror what some of the other panelists said, people is a challenge. We have been doing this for a long time, and so our organizational adoption of cloud technologies is elevated, but it's a constant work stream. Right. You have to continue to work at that until you get 100% adoption and acceptance by your community. So cloud is a potential catalyst for change in an organization, not just on the technology, but on how you use technology to perform the business of an agency. It's also can be a transformation agent, right. But it takes active work to be able to exploit that and drive that into an organization. That's the biggest challenge for us, sure. And it's also the biggest green space in front of us, sure. And it's where we're pouring a lot of our effort. If you just move some workload from an on-prem system to an off-prem system, you've gained very little. Right. You might save a few bucks on hosting. Absolutely.
You just want to move old stuff to another place.
Absolutely. So we're investing more of our time working very closely with our business customers to make sure that when we make that transformation to the cloud, that we transform the business process that sits on top of that infrastructure, right. That we look for new and more efficient ways to do the business of GSA, whether that's managing public buildings or doing acquisition or providing technology to the federal space. And that's where we see our greatest gains. We can double and triple down on the value of the transformation in moves to the cloud. So
yeah, terrific. And that change issue, and this is true. I've seen this over and over again. People that fear change and try to fight against change. Then there are people that view change as opportunities, and people that view that change as opportunities are the people that rise up in the organization. I mean, they find ways to become innovative around the change that's happening. Don, what do you see are some of the challenges, the constraints that you need to sort of get over in order to get to where you want to be?
Well, there's actually two I'd like to mention.
Okay.
One from what we see within our customer base, which is really before you make that step, right, before you start looking at that appropriate move to the cloud, really taking a hard look at what you currently have in your enterprise today from an application perspective.
Probably a lot of stuff you can throw away.
Absolutely, absolutely. The efficiencies you can gain from that assessment, but also, the right decisions you can make is an outcome of that as well. So understanding both the business and the technology around those applications and making the right step towards which platform or which type of landing zone you need to build for those applications. On the industry side, this goes back to one of the Colonel's comments as well, is I think there's still a challenge between industry and the government as far as compliance, right? How do we need to drive towards it? I think
good point.
Yeah, we both want the same thing, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a driver and incentive to all of our efforts. FedRAMP has made an outstanding step, I believe, towards really creating more of an efficient process and a more of a process that we know what the outcome should be. I think on the other side, at the same time, we're having meetings with DISA to actually start driving how that compliance framework will work within our environments and other provider environments as well, so we can move aggressively towards making sure the government has choices across compliant platforms for that.
They're excellent points. They're all excellent points. How's that service level agreement get structured? In a cloud environment, and what about liabilities if something, and all that stuff. So it's a challenge to the acquisition workforce because it's a new way of thinking. Chris Wiedemann, what do you think? What's some of the challenges out there? There's hurdles you got to get over.
Sure, and I think that last point is actually a very good one.
Yeah,
one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing from where we sit is related to acquisition. So once a customer, someone in government has decided that they're ready to move to the cloud and they've identified the applications and the workloads that they're willing to move there, the question is still, how do they do that contractually? And that speaks both to SLAs as well as to funding sources and things that used to work in a world of on-prem deployment that don't necessarily translate one-to-one into a cloud environment. And that's really something that we've been working pretty actively on overcoming, but that's an ongoing process. We're seeing some progress being made with a few different acquisition approaches, but it's still sort of a moving target right now.
Terrific. Dan Kent, what do you think? What are some of the challenges that you bump into, things that you really want to get over that hurdle to get things moving the way you want and get where you want to be?
Yeah, I think the first one I see with the customers is people, but that's already been discussed, so I won't go there. The next one is typically security, and I think that's very well expected as well. And really the issue with security is depending on what's going to the cloud, it's a different answer. So there's not one single answer for securing my cloud. It's
Email
different.
Versus
infrastructure as a service. Is it data, and who owns the data? And if I put the data somewhere else, does that location have access and control of that data? Especially as I look out in the States, it's the same issue. And data sovereignty is clearly critical in a government environment. So that's one of the areas that we have to sit with our customers and talk about all the time is what's going to be our strategy. From a vendor perspective, I again have to go back to what was already brought up. As a cloud service provider, of course, I want to be providing clouds to the federal government, so I have to meet the regulations, of course. But if I go back to the 1990s, there was a real push to go to commercial off-the-shelf products. And the reason why we did that was to get the overall cost of IT down. The more levels of security, the more levels of compliance gets us further away from that commercial off-the-shelf. So I think we have to continuously remind ourselves that. Let me give you some numbers. There's about 16,000 cloud applications out there today. There's about 52 that have FedRAMP compliance. And I believe you just said there was 2 or 3 that are in the DoD. So clearly that's not quite commercial off the shelf. And not that I'm saying it has to be. I don't think everything has to be commercial off the shelf. But we want to be able to have enough competition out there so you get the best price. So it really is on teamwork of the government and industry to figure out how we can get security so that we don't have so much, we don't go so far away from commercial off the shelf that you really are just getting a private cloud that someone else is owning and operating for you, and you're paying twice as much as you could do yourself.
Yeah, all excellent points. Very, very good. Well said. John Hale, what's some of the lessons you're learning through this process, things that maybe your colleagues out in the government and industry would like to hear?
So Don highlighted it in his last comment. So one of the things that we're learning is as we move workload to a cloud environment, number one is to do a self-assessment, to really know where you're at today, to know what your requirements are, and to drive towards a solution that meets your requirements, and to stay away from what we call the SOS or the shiny object syndrome, which is I want to leverage this capability just because I want to leverage this capability. And it's really about looking at your requirements, finding the right solution that meets your requirements, and moving that capability there. And then, working, day to day to overcome any obstacles that stand in the way of meeting the objectives. Overall, from a department perspective, when we look at cloud computing, commercial on-prem, off-prem, everything that we do is geared towards two things. A, providing more agile capability to the warfighter, and B, saving money for the Department of Defense and ultimately the federal government. So that's really where we're at.
Shiny object syndrome. That's a first for me. One thing I love about this show is I get like really good little anecdotes and quips and things like that, and then people think I'm smart. They don't realize I'm just picking them up from people at these shows here. Colonel Rozsnyai, what's some of the lessons you're learning along the way here as you move to cloud?
Well, I think a better focus on rationalization and going back to the inventory of what do you have, right? But not just the rationalization in terms of what applications we're going to keep and where the redundancies are, but we have to really start looking at it from the data element perspective, right? Because a lot of these applications have been built in their own little stovepipes over the years. And if you just move that to a new environment called infrastructure as a service, you're still going to have a lot of duplicate amount of data out there. And so we've got to look at rationalizing the databases as they come in and centralizing that, because that's really the key to setting the conditions to be able to harness something like big data analytics or more powerful algorithms to give you better decision-making down the road. And then you'll also learn that we've already said that cloud may not be, or certain cloud providers of technology may not be the right answer for that workload. And there are some things that we're going to keep on-prem either because it's mission-related or maybe it's a modernization cost. It's just too cost-prohibitive to get it up to that level. So I would tell you that the larger the community of folks that are doing this, the bigger the amount of lessons learned that we're going to get out of it. And this is why it's good to have panels like this. We can share these lessons learned across federal government and industry space as well. We meet transparently with industry very, very routinely because we're gathering lessons learned and we're looking at what's the next evolution of the game-changing technology that's going to help us to move forward.
And I think that's a smart thing to do.
And I think that, the last thing is I'll go back to this orchestration provisioning capability. We have to be able, as a hybrid environment, we have to have a specific tool. We're not as interested in using a vendor specific solution because of lots of security reasons there's out there. There's some other things that are out there, but really from a training perspective, we need a single orchestration capability that'll help us to move across any cloud environment.
Yeah, excellent. Well put. And David, I want to hear from you too on this, but we first need to take, and our industry guest, first need to take a break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with John Hale from DISA, Colonel Rozsnyai from U.S. Army, Dan Kent from Cisco Systems, Chris Wiedemann from immixGroup, Don Hewitt from Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and David Shive from GSA, who we will now hear from. We didn't have a chance to hear from David in the last segment. What are some of the lessons learned, Dave, as you work your way through this transition to cloud?
Well, I want to echo what Colonel Rozsnyai said. Moving to the cloud doesn't fix problems. If you have bad IT practice internal to your shop and you move stuff to the cloud and you don't change, all you're doing is moving that bad practice out to the cloud and you've gained nothing. So that's one of the pitfalls to look out for. Fix your IT practices, your IT operations inside as a part of the move to the cloud. The other part is most of the traditional barriers that have been put up, usually mental barriers have been put up to the move to the cloud. We've found that those can be overcome. The security questions, they can be answers. There's good answers to the security questions. The adoption, and there's good answers to getting your user community to adopt cloud-based applications. There's good answers, and we've found that we've not found any barriers that we haven't been able to overcome. And then
that security thing, I used to always tell people, security is not a constraint; it's a challenge. And
it is.
You can step up to a challenge.
It is, and it's likely that if there are real security concerns right now that would stop you from moving workloads to the cloud, it's likely that working very closely with our industry partners, that we'll be able to overcome those in the near future. So plan for that. Plan for that. And then the third part is We can't get this done without our industry partners. We need our industry partners to continue to innovate and to continue to provide opportunities for the move to the cloud. What exists now, what we move to the cloud now is going to be very different 3 years from now, very different 5 years from now. Continue to work with us, continue to hear what our needs are. We'll continue to see the directions that our industry partners are going in and architect a path forward that will.
And the Colonel made that point too. You know, you need to get out there and hear. Occasionally, I'll bump into an IT person in an agency says, "Well, I don't really talk to vendors," and I walk away thinking to myself, "You're going to be obsolete in about 6 months." I mean, you better hear what's going on in industry if you want to, be effective in your job. Chris Wiedemann, what do you think? What are some of the lessons learned here?
I think a theme of most of the answers we've heard so far is that cloud really isn't a silver bullet, and that actually translates over to the industry side as well. So if you think back to 2011 when the 25-point plan was first released, there was a tendency to think that if you could slap the cloud label on something, then you would be set. And as we've seen, I mean, the realization now is that not all cloud services are created equal. And so I'd say one of the biggest lessons we've learned is that you still really need to understand what the unique requirements are. You need to be able to tailor to the mission that your partner, that your customers have.
Absolutely. Well put. Dan, Cisco, what are some of the lessons learned you're seeing here?
I think especially in the government where we know hybrid cloud is going to be the answer for a long time, the lesson learned is you can get a lot of cost savings, get a lot of lessons learned if you look in your own house.
Very good.
Yeah, so focus on getting that private cloud, get the processes changed and in place to get used to automation, and that's a good place to start.
Excellent. Don, what do you think in terms of the lesson learned?
One of the things I really want to borrow from Mr. Hale with his permission is the SOS term. I think the shiny object syndrome is definitely a lesson learned with respect to a lot of the government procurements we see. They look at what is they look at what is the best thing on the market I can leverage, but it might not be the right fit for them. So there needs to be a journey defined. They need to be careful of not overreaching. I think it's some of the lessons we're starting to see with respect to the move to cloud and those types of applications. So really a lot of introspect, you might say, with respect to the environment that needs to be had in order to be able to effectively make that move.
Yeah, great points, guys. Really good points there. Good lessons learned. Let's talk about the future. We've got about 14 minutes left, so we like to always end the show by, sort of like taking a look at what this is all going to mean down the road. What's infrastructure going to look like down the road? How will government services be improved? I mean, if we're doing this, we're doing it for a reason. We want to see things be better and more efficient and so forth. So put on your, let's look into your crystal ball and what's it look like down the road. Let's work our way right down the table. Chris, what's the future look like as a result of all these programs?
I think it was actually on this panel last year where someone raised the idea of, cloud no longer being a term in and of itself. It'll just be the way IT is delivered. Now, I don't think that will ever fully happen in this environment. Some things will always have to stay on-prem, but there's a very real chance that in the next 5 to 10 years, the way that we deliver technology to government will have fundamentally changed. And what we want to make sure that we can do is maintain the same level of partnership and focus on the mission while providing the same level of choice that we currently can in the cost environment.
Yeah, that's excellent. You're right, too. I mean, I think cloud eventually will be the first thought when you think of a new IT program. It may not always be cloud, but it'll be certainly on the list of things to think about. Dan Kent, Cisco, what's it look like down the road, Dan? Where's this all going?
Sure. I think we have to acknowledge that cloud is just one transformation happening amongst many. We look at our mobile workforce. We look at how we're connecting things that have never been connected before. So IT is reaching out and going into mission side more than it ever has before. And so you look at cloud, it becomes the platform for all of this next generation applications that are being written today, which is really an undercurrent that we didn't talk a lot about here. But cloud really is about delivering applications. The infrastructure really is irrelevant. It's the applications that are relevant. And those are going to be rewritten with microservices. They're going to be much faster. IT has to be faster to meet the needs of our customers. And you're going to see IT playing in places it's never played before. So cloud is that infrastructure that gives you that capability. It helps the application be delivered to anyone, anywhere, at any time, in a way that can be fully secure. So this whole concept of IoT, right, Internet of Things, talks about connecting buildings, connecting cars, connecting airplanes. It's all happening, and cloud will be that infrastructure that allows it to be seamless.
Yeah, excellent points. We just had a radio show on Internet of Things, and it was fascinating. Some of the stories and some of the things that were being talked about actually were eye-openers. It was a lot of fun. David Shive, what do you think? What's this look like down the road to you?
So I see infrastructure, the borders dissolving in infrastructure in the same way they've dissolved with end user computing. We no longer have to point to some on-prem system with some endpoint and contain that whole ecosystem as government-owned. I think that the borders that exist in infrastructure will continue to dissolve over time. I see acquisition of technology, cloud-based technology, becoming more closely aligned with the rapid pace of change of IT, and that's going to help considerably. And I see that the borders that exist between federal agencies are also going to dissolve with the increased use of cloud, so that there's shared work streams and shared work products across the federal government rather than just in silos within federal agencies.
Yeah, excellent point. Dan Hewitt, what do you think? Where's this going down the road?
I really think there's going to be an evolution with how we define the service itself, right? So we're going to see today where still a vast portion of the federal budget is being spent with respect to cloud on infrastructure as a service. What we're going to start to see is that move up the stack. We're starting to see an evolution of both the technology, the service definement, what it looks like. I think software as a service, the applications as a service are definitely going to become more relevant in the near future. I think we'll see the lower tiers start to become much more, I hate to use the term commoditized, but that's really just the way the market works. At the same time, I think we're going to see SLAs become more and more relevant at those tiers and really start to drive more of that relationship between the provider and the customer themselves. Technology is going to advance. We're going to start to see some of the common denominators that are defined as cloud today. The VM might very well go away. We might see containers take its place. We might see other type of usage-based offerings take its place at higher tiers. But I definitely think the service model is going to continue to innovate and continue to drive more efficiencies and more capabilities into the government space.
Yeah, great. And in that point I made earlier about the next generation of the workforce is going to have dramatically different expectations about how long it takes to get an app in place and get a service in place. Colonel Rozsnyai, what's your crystal ball look like? What's it look like down the road? What's your vision for the future?
Well, as you know, this is last year we published the Army Network Campaign Plan, and there was a near-term and a mid-term guidance with that, and that took us out to about 7 years. And now we've just released the Shaping the Army Network document as a companion to that, and that's really what we call STAN, and that's really to take us and let's look at 2025 to 2040, and let's look at the technologies and game-changing things that we're looking at down the road. I think we're going to see more intelligent infrastructure, right? Dynamic transport. I think we're going to see dynamic computing and edge sensors and things like that are really going to help us to get after the data to decisive action piece, and that's that human cognitive enhancement, right? Helping us to make decisions much more faster. I think that you're going to see that infrastructure learn from itself and the activities that are going on and how people are using it to, from an operational perspective, to really kind of help shape and remorph itself to meet those requirements down the road.
Yeah, actually I was participated in a big WebEx about the future, and what we were talking about is like almost a new dimension, in terms of the way we're going to be living. And it's going to be a decision making as time approaches zero. I mean, you're going to need technology to make decisions in real time. Especially when it comes to the missions that a lot of you guys have, and war and terrorists and so forth and so forth. I mean, the issue is going to take place immediate, and the decisions have to be immediate. It's no longer we need to run it up the chain, down the chain, whatever. The chain's going to have to be automated up and down. I mean, you still might have a chain, but it's not going to be a pick up a phone kind of a process. So
I think that's where you're going to see this bigger shift towards software-defined networking and software-defined sensors too, right? To get after changing for the cybersecurity aspects.
Absolutely. John Hale, what's it look like down the road for you? Where's this all going? DISA plays a major role in this stuff.
So I'll tell you, I'll take a slightly different angle, and you've touched on it a couple times. Dan touched on it in his closing comments there. Mobility really is the big game changer for what I see going forward within the department. And as I look at my son is 15, and as I look at my son, he lives in a world where he's never known without the internet. Right. He's never known without instant data in his hand. And, they did a poll amongst high school seniors recently where they asked, if you were stranded on a desert island, what were the top 3 things you would take? And their internet-connected mobile device was number 1. By the way, food wasn't even on the list. And so that tells you that as those folks enter our workforce, that's what they're demanding. They're demanding that instant on now gratification. I need the data to make my key decisions now in my hand. And so what we're doing from a cloud computing perspective is really setting the groundwork to enable all of that transition to happen. If we don't meet those needs, our workforce, when they come in, they're going to look somewhere else to get the information they need. You're right. And it may not necessarily meet our security requirements. And that's we got to do what we have to do now in order to set that up so that they're in the right place when they enter the workforce to get what they need to get the job done.
It'd be interesting. Probably take some psychiatry or psychological studies here to understand how a lot of this is going to work. Like with my kids and grandkids now, calling them up is like a burden for them. It's like, Dad, just text me. And so forth. So it's going to be interesting as to how the dynamics of social interaction and things like that are going to change over time as the world goes to more, texting and whatever comes beyond texting, because the traditional ways of communicating are slowly fading away. I know my kids sometimes, are bothered when I call them up, It's like, we don't communicate like that anymore. So anyway, well, I've been taking some notes. Let me take a stab here of trying to do some recapping of some of the points we made. We talked about progress. I liked the idea of Cloud 2.0. We've moved beyond the idea of, what is cloud. We're now on how we're going to implement cloud in the next version, and clearly it is now real. It is no longer just something people are talking about. It's real. It's a major strategy that everyone here is embracing. We talked a bit about commercialization of cloud and the need for hybrids. There's still a need for hybrid, but we also talked about the trends. The trends are moving more and more towards commercial. Start with the easy back office stuff and then work your way up so you can prove the concepts first, then move into the next generations. When we talked about specific programs, I was impressed with David's comment of going from 17 different email systems down to 1. That might not sound, sexy or whatever, but having been there and done that, knowing that that's not a trivial thing to do in an agency to get to that point. When we talked about programs, we talked a lot about collaboration. I think collaboration came up over and over again with talking about successful programs, the need to collaborate amongst internally, collaborate with industry, collaborate with other agencies, and cloud is going to be a great enabler of that. We talked about security intelligence. I think Dan brought that up, that with cloud you have an opportunity to offer more intelligence about security and what's happening, and it can be viewed as an opportunity to take a holistic approach to securing your infrastructure. Challenges, people and culture was all over that, and it always is. Anytime you talk about technology, anytime you talk about technology transformation, people and culture are a big deal. We've had people say many, many times, it's not the technology, it's the people and culture change that needs to go along with the technology. We talked about the need for more authority to operate in companies that can work and get more certifications done. FedRAMP came up several times as being an enabler of that, and changes to FedRAMP, speeding up the process is becoming a big deal. We talked about the challenges around security, that it's one thing in moving certain data to the clouds, but we have things that are like national security issues, and you mentioned the nuclear issues and things like that are a totally different set of issues that need to be looked at. We talked about lessons learned. One of the things that resonated with me is pretty much everyone says you got to do a self-assessment and first get your governance and your own IT shop in place and modernize it. We don't want to move old stuff and old processes to another platform. We're not really accomplishing anything. And I actually know of a story of an agency moved several things to the cloud, but they didn't have the money to move everything. So now they're basically operating double what they were operating in the first place. So it was like sort of made no sense to not have the plans and the money in place first. We talked about the need to partner. We talked about cloud doesn't fix problems. You need to fix the problems. Don't expect cloud to be this panacea that's going to make all your issues go away. And the good IT practices and governance. When we talked about future, we talked about cloud becoming more of a standard down the road, a standard operating platform. It won't be think about as it was in the past where, we have our operations and then we'll think about going to the cloud. You'll be think about cloud first strategies. Lots of transformation happening at the same time. It's not just all about cloud. I think that was brought up. You've got a lot of things to manage and they've all got to come together so you don't have two ships missing each other in the night. IT borders dissolving, and we talked a lot about mobility and the next generation workforce and how they're going to have expectations in this area. For me, it's another knowledge sharing session in a wonderful way to talk about things, and hopefully we're talking about things that will benefit next generations and our kids and our grandkids down the road, because you are all in positions to do that. With that, I want to thank our panelists for taking time from your very, very busy schedules to be with us and share your knowledge. I want to thank our sponsors, without which we don't have a show. Thank you for sponsoring and being on the show. I want to thank the good people here at Federal News Radio and WTOP that always do such a fine job hosting us. And finally, and most importantly, I want to thank our listening audience out there that tunes in each month and listens to the show. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM.